And before I pull the card on the opposition and whether it has effectively been rendered invaluable since the handshake, there appears to be the same playbook of the 1970s, early 1970s. Ahmed, I'll come to you on this, where we have seen the change to the constitution movement. I'm sure no one on this roundtable was born then. To stop the then vice president, that is Daniel Toroitich Arap Moi, now retired, to stop from ascending to power following the sudden demise of the then president, that is Kenyatta Senior, in Mombasa County 001. Then, of course, it wasn't. However, looking at the current development and to just put that in parallel with the current political ongoings in the country, are we likely to say perhaps a more cause towards the opposition of the Deputy President William Ruto, in the sense that the likes of David Murathas will have now an avenue, a platform and a channel to oppose him, in the sense that now there will be the creation of a narrative to depict him as the bad guy, while his supporters and allies say that he's just a son of a peasant who helped the president ascend to power for 10 years and that he should be given the credit, whether it's due, in the sense that he needs to be paid back politically to rule the country from 2022 to 2032. Perhaps, again, it speaks to the sense of seeing the creation of a political narrative in the country, as was the case in the European Parliament, which ended up in the recent elections of having a fragmented parliament in the capital in Brussels, where you have seen Matteo Salvini in Italy preaching that, as well as Nigel Farage and Boris Johnson in the UK, and also Viktor Orban in Hungary, and Marine Le Pen in France, not to mention Donald Trump, who is now again launching another campaign bid for 2020 elections. Is that narrative a Kenyan narrative that might play in the build-up to 2022, as was the case in the 1970s, to block the DP William Ruto, and then which was planned to block the then Vice President, that is Daniel Toroitich Arap Moi?
Well, I think this idea of first believing that certain communities only can ascend to the presidency itself is a very dangerous route that we don't need to take. Central Kenya produced 3 presidents, including Kibaki, Uhuru, Kenyatta Senior and Junior. Does it mean that they are richer than other regions? It's only a clique that have benefited from the political system. But if you go to places like Githunguri here in Kiambu, or you go to Manyata in Embu, there are places in this country where kids go to school without shoes and tattered trousers, yet they have produced 3 presidents. That's not what helps people. What helps people is the laws you make and the policies you make that will give resources across the country with the right leadership. Then those resources are managed and implemented in the right reasons. Meaning, if we need to build a hospital for that amount of money, then we need to build that hospital. But we inflate and then do that.
And then the timing.
And then the timing. We are not facing, as my colleague has said, we are not facing succession problems right now. We had it between Jaramogi Oginga Odinga and Tom Mboya rivalry in 1967. We had the one of Moi in 1978-79. We have it now. Now, what we need, and we are taking a dangerous precedent in saying that when Murathe comes to us and tells us Ruto is a thief, then allegedly, then you have been a thief too, because you have been together for 5 years. Why are you speaking when the president is serving his final term and he doesn't need another term? Murathe and Uhuru Kenyatta know that without Ruto, they could not ascend to power because of the bulk of votes he was bringing to the table. There are people who are alluding that it was him who managed the nominations. That's why the likes of Kabogo have lost.
And many other Central Kenya political figures who accuse him of...
Now, I am sure the president knew that what Ruto is doing will serve him. Because if the president then was, as he says, he was at that Mokorino meeting, I would have respected him when he tells people off, I will campaign, I will win. Where was he? Some people were telling him he was just some places doing his own things. Literally, there's a time people were saying Ruto was the one running the country in the first 5 years. So what we are saying is, this tendency of saying Central Kenya will produce a president, Rift Valley will produce a president, deputy president, or even a president, how long can that continue? History shows us that every country that does not provide for its citizens ends up in a very bad way. Somalia was one of them. Libya is now going through. Kenyans are not angels. If you go to the streets of Nairobi today, people are telling you we are tired. Now, how long are we going to wait to entertain a clique of people we are paying to do the job and they're not doing it? What needs to happen right now is the handshake cannot save Kenyans if Kenyans are hungry.
No food on the table.
No food on the table, there will be no handshake thing. The president, I'm just reading an article of the Star saying that the president ordered the DCI to investigate the claims made by. Now, if Ruto himself believed in the Constitution, why didn't he record a statement and go to the right channel? Use the system. Why do you go to the president to complain? You are the deputy president of this country. You go to the DCI, record statement, get a lawyer, go to court. If the people are cleared, they will be acquitted. If they are found to have done that, they will be jailed. And then, in the meantime, the president can ask them, now that you have been alleged to have done this and this and this, step aside.
Okay.
Is the president of this country bold enough to tell the people who have been alleged to have committed a crime of assassination magnitude to step aside today? He can't.
Okay, because largely you look at the cabinet makeup and it is as a result of political appointee and bringing your cronies on board.
Yeah, it is the ethnic bargain, but 50% are this, 50% are this. That's how they negotiate it.
And that seems to be not paying off, isn't it?
It is not. It's not going to pay.
I couldn't agree more on what is coming out. Is that yes, the president is in a really tight spot at the moment. But then, speaking to the earlier question you talked about with regards to the referendum question and the role of the opposition, it's clear right now that yes, the opposition is not doing their job in terms of checking the government. What they're basically doing is, every time a government comes, the executive comes with the policy, they just rubber stamp it and it moves. It doesn't matter whether it is, it falls within the ideology or not. Yet, the role of an opposition is actually to come up with alternate ideas and policies that check on the government, isn't it?
Okay.
And that is not being done right now. So the country is actually suffering from lack of alternative views. We cannot actually say
a plan B.
Yeah, we have no plan B. We are just sitting there and waiting for the government to come up with ideas, then they rubber stamp it, then it next. Just rubber stamp and then ask next. So we are not doing very well. Now, having said that, the issue of the referendum question and tied to the 1978-79 succession, every time we want to change leadership, we look at the constitution and say, we do not want person B to ascend to power, so we go around and change the constitution. My hypothesis, it will fail. It's very difficult to actually go out to the country and tell them we are changing the constitution, because that is what it looks like. It doesn't matter what people are telling us that yes, we will do a BBI and then come up and give a report. It doesn't matter how it looks like. What it looks like is we are changing the constitution to stop person B from ascending to power.
The individualization.
Yes, the individualization of the whole thing. And the country will revolt. People are going to say, look, we gave you a mandate for 10 years, all right? You haven't delivered. We are hungry. Our children can't go to school. We can't get the houses you're talking about. Cost of living has gone up. We can't get jobs. But somehow you have money to pay for an exercise that is not going to change my life.
Okay.
All it's going to do is add another position or add another tier of government or do whatever it is that you're coming up with and selling it. It will fail.
For political purpose.
So these two gentlemen, whatever it is they're working on, they have to be very careful, because if it is about creating another type of government, if it is about creating positions within the constitution
for
individuals, the country is going to vote no. And I'm telling you, it will be a very big loss and it will be an embarrassment they have never seen.
Okay, and looking at the developments across the world, and more so the African continent, and the fact that there has been a paradigm shift politically, and you look at Ethiopia, it is in the transformation mode now, with a very vibrant prime minister who is young and equally establishing that country to be the powerhouse and the get-in of the sub-Saharan Africa, owing to perhaps having the backing of the human resource that he can channel out, and the fact that Ethiopia again is strategically located down there. Magufuli is doing some miracles, but it appears that we are going to be sandwiched in the event our foreign policy is not going to be all right done.
Rwanda.
On the opposition, not Rwanda, that's a heaven in the region.
Ghana.
Done. And not to mention South Africa equally, which is institutionally democracy. Then on this point, all this unfolding, notwithstanding developments in the ruling Jubilee Party and in the opposition National Super Alliance, because the sister parties of the ODM party have said that they need a share of the 4.1 billion Kenya shillings need to be rolled out by the party's funding. And we are not seeing, again, all this happening. We are not seeing an opposition entity reinventing itself and coalescing around a national cause here to try and lift the country from the current depths of despair to the great heights of political hope. Who can be Kenya's next opposition face here with regards to touching on the economy, touching on the foreign policy, touching on what's happening in the region, and that our position as the blue-eyed boy of the region can no longer be guaranteed. There's no permanency in that. It's only now temporary because of what's happening, the political development around Kenya, east, west, north, south, you look, and what's coming up is really a gigantic sense of perhaps countries that are grouping themselves economically, socially, and politically, and that might deepen our current state because our inner politics, intercommunication sense appears to be not heading in the right direction.
And you also forgot to mention, I'm just seeing it on the page 4 of this, the Standard, why we risk
being landlocked.
Being a landlocked country. And you see, like we are talking it about before the show, Kenyans are going to wake up to reality of so many things that have happened in the backdrop of politicking. And so unfortunate. Like when we actually going to lose this case, and you realize that we are no longer, having of how, we are just landlocked, cannot gain our revenue by, having a port and all these things. And secondly, there are so many cases that our Kenyans are having. Migingo, we don't know whether that case was resolved or not.
It was never resolved.
And right now, the Ethiopia that have actually emulated us is now, overtaking this country in the expense of politicking. That is very sad state about this country. But then, coming back to what you've just mentioned, you see there are lessons that we can learn from. And one of the things I was discussing with Fred before the show is the fact that, please, when the power is ending, you don't know the future, and you don't know what might happen when you're antagonizing some people. Mount Kenya region seems not to learn. It's the same thing that happens in 1978. And the country, that region, with the presidency of Moi, faced a lot of marginalization. And faced a lot of state, state marginalization and state brutality. Why? Because in the advent of Daniel Toroitich arap Moi,
the bull of his presidency,
there was movement about stopping him. It's the same thing that probably is happening right now. The Luo nation has learned very carefully. And you see that every time we are always in opposition, because we're always opposing people who seems trying to ascend into power. And I like what my colleague has said. When will we learn that there needs to institutionalize the distribution of resources and wealth so that all the 42 tribes in this country feel a sense of feel a sense of being belonging to us Kenyans? That is what we've not learned. But then I am appalled by the fact that, you see, during the State of the Nation address, President Kenyatta actually came out of 3 strong points. One, unity for the country. 2 is trying to revamp economy and the Big 4 agenda. And the third is fight against corruption.